Yeah, it has. Obviously, for those of you who have seen that recently, we had it says three, but actually there's probably about four or five schools that have pulled away from us, and we just responded to what I thought was a irresponsible message from the mayor that would kind of very broadly wishing all homophobes to have I think the word was uncomfortable month. And I kindly responded, and that's visible. That's visible for the reason of, look, we want to be transparent, that we reached out to the mayor and said, come and talk about this. That actually that's a broad statement, and just because you don't believe in a homosexual relationship or homosexual marriage, in no way does that make you a homophobe. So that got me in a bit of bother, and I responded to that by video. And of course, some local press has covered that. I believe that we're allowing the system of LGBTQ plus to bully us into to something that we can't agree with. And again, for me, as I said in the interview, sorry for the ins and outs here, but silence for the church cannot be an option anymore. You know, we have a faith to defend, and we must defend this. We don't defend it, we lose.
Anyway, after a few months, we have an after-hours diversity and inclusion training that was obligatory. We come to a question and answer session, anyway, she kind of encouraged if anybody has got anything to say or to comment or to ask. So one of the people who asked the question was myself, and I said, I'm wondering how you define discrimination, because based on what I've heard, I have this question: would a mere expression of one's beliefs be viewed as discrimination? Because it sounds, some of the things she said sounded like that.
So your beliefs around marriage, for example.
So the next day, the headmaster calls me to his office and says, Ben, what you said yesterday during that diversity and inclusion, what irony, by the way, a diversity and inclusion meeting. And he tells me I offended some people with my views. What he is really telling me, he's going to sack me for just holding those beliefs and mentioning them in a safe space, which is, I thought, this is incredible.
Well, could I just clarify? So he was saying expressing mainstream Christian views in your private life could bring the Christian school into disrepute. He also sent a letter home saying that somebody had been suspended or removed from the site for safeguarding reasons.
The headmaster said, in a letter to the parents, of which I found later on, I think he mentioned safeguarding issues to do with Mr. Dybowski's views. Which the views were, you believe marriage is a man and a woman?
Yeah, largely mainstream Christian views. Yeah.
So that's crazy. I thought this is what this guy is claiming makes no sense.
Yes, you got it. Yes, this process has been already quite long. It started 5 years ago when the police started to investigate my Twitter update, and then when it came into public, then there came several other accusations about my writings and TV and radio programs. And now I'm happy that I have won twice. First, the Helsinki District Court, and then the Court of Appeal. It was unanimous, 3 judges who decided that they didn't find any crime in my writings, but the prosecutor is continuing the process, and they have asked the permission to appeal to the Supreme Court. I have got many messages from people who tell that they are not Christians and they do not agree with me, but they defend my freedom to speech. And because it is important for everyone that they can express their opinions and their convictions.
And I think that's partly in the way that our society now works is so much about feelings. And you can't hurt somebody's feelings, even if what you're saying is true and expressed in a fairly neutral way. The risk of it hurting someone's feelings is too great. And one of the bizarre things about the whole process was that the school's safeguarding lead, who seems to have driven a lot of what happened to me, objected to me talking about marriage as a positive thing, full stop, regardless of Christian marriage and just man-woman marriage. Because she took the view that because lots of children in the school would have parents who were divorced or separated or remarried, and potentially same-sex parenting, that it would hurt their feelings effectively to make them feel they weren't normal or something, because I was talking about the ideal of marriage, which is a nonsense, because, as you say, all the evidence is very clear that marriage and the raising of children by the children's own two parents is an ideal form, which has benefits and departures from that norm. Although very often people have good outcomes with non-traditional parenting, the statistical average is that the chances are you're not going to get the good outcomes. And you know, and it shouldn't be controversial to say that. And the other thing to say in terms of, you know, advising people who are in this position, you know, if it's a dribble of things and it's nothing too drastic, you can probably live with it. But there will come a point where you're not being true to yourself, and the self-censorship and the cutting off bits of your own soul internally because you don't say anything is worse than saying something, being honest, being true to yourself, living by truth rather than living by life, actually actively living by truth. Even if you lose your job, even if things go horribly pear-shaped in a practical sense, at least you can look yourself in the mirror every day.
Well, I mean, it's perfectly true now that marriage is becoming a minority occupation in this country. Now, you can't attribute all of that to gay marriage. I mean, that's basically obviously a nonsense. Marriage was already declining. Respect for marriage, the feeling that it was necessary to be married in order to have children, all that was already declining. I think what gay marriage did was act as a catalyst. But of course, it's not only priests who are having their consciences overridden, not at all. In that speech that I've already referred to, I listed a whole lot of occupations which I thought were going to be very adversely affected, that people would not be able to take part in them. And for example, I said guest house owners, printers, website designers, teachers, housing officials, registrars, NHS chaplains, adoption workers, foster carers. I never thought of bakers, but of course we've even had that with Ash's Bakery. I never thought of that at the time. So your point about the clergy is well made, but they are at the moment at least protected by the quadruple lock. Other professions are not protected. It's worth pointing out that the courts have always stood up for the right of the individual and have said that in a democratic society, a view that marriage is between one man and one woman is worthy of respect. They've said that, and they've continually found in favour of people who've been dismissed because of that. But of course, there is a difference between being dismissed and being hired in the first place. But it's in our own hands. It's in our own hands how far we're governed by fear. As I've said, you know, we can't all be sacked. That's impossible. And if enough people will stand up for something, as has happened with the backlash against the trans stuff, enough people had said, hang on, enough is enough. If enough people take a stand, then at the very least, there is safety in numbers.
So I was invited by an organisation to contribute to a conference, in particular, a roundtable discussion on religious and cultural sensitivities when planning and teaching RSHE, so relationship, sex and health education. It was intended to be a platform for different perspectives, for diverse perspectives, and was intended to provide a space for dialogue about the development and delivery of RSHE and taking into consideration religious and cultural sensitivities. So I accepted this invitation, only then later on to have that invitation rescinded when it was understood that my inclusion was causing some problems because of my views, in particular on marriage and on other issues to do with sexuality as well, or should I say my Christian views in particular. It was communicated to me that that my presence there, talking about religious and cultural sensitivities, could lead to ideological conflicts, and and there was a reluctance to be associated with me representing the Association of Christian Teachers, given our religious stance on LGBT issues. It seems that there's more going on behind the scenes here. So I spoke to some friends actually who are legal bods and who are sort of specialists in this area. So they advised me to do a subject access request. And although it sounds very technical, requesting my data, all that means is requesting any information they have about me, that they might have used my name, they might have emailed someone else about me or about the association I work for. And I did that twice, because the first time I made a request to one party involved, and there was some information that was still not being revealed, which I think they possibly could have revealed to me. So I then did a further subject access request to another party involved, and then that kind of managed to substantiate what was really going on, and gave me much of a fuller picture.
One of the things that's good that's come out is I think there's now real clarity, and I think we can see that the process so far has been basically dishonest. We can see what the goal is. We can see that although these things are often presented as a compromise, just a settle it, that none of these are a settled position, that inevitably will lead to a certain goal. The whole LF discussions have been marked by a lack of trust, and also any church which has actually changed its doctrine of marriage has faced rapid decline. The Scottish Episcopal Church, when it changed its doctrine of marriage, it declined by 40% in the following 6 years. So one of the things, my frustrations in the debate is we weren't connecting those three issues together. And in fact, in my speech, I named them explicitly. I said, if we vote this through, we will corrode trust, we will divide, and we will decline. Those of us who have got problems with this process, we don't have problems because we are trying to be difficult. We're not saying this because we are schismatic, because being schismatic means dividing on something that doesn't matter. This really matters, because what's at stake is, do we follow the teaching of Jesus on marriage on the one hand, but the other thing is, are we Anglicans? So historically, Anglicans with the Church Catholic in every place, in every culture, in every time, in every tradition, has always said that male-female monogamous marriage is what is Jesus' teaching. It's part of the gospel. It's God's intention in creation of making humanity male and female. So what we're saying is, we're sticking with that. We're Anglicans. We're true to the historic teaching. Yeah. What do you do when some of the bishops in the church, others have resisted this, and others have spoken out and said, we don't agree with this process either, and that's a growing group? What do we do when some of our bishops say, well, we just don't believe this, despite what we vowed, despite the commission, despite the seriousness of this issue, despite the fact that it's dividing the church, when actually part of what the bishops are supposed to be doing is keeping the church united in the teaching of Jesus, in the good news of the kingdom. So what do we do? I don't think banding around insults is going to help. I think what is going to help is staying steadfast and staying true to that teaching.
That's where my kind of research phase came in, where I started looking online and trying to figure out, why do I not feel like the other girls? Why am I not like them? I found transgenderism. Right. I found little boys dressed as little girls, professing that they were little girls at the age of 2. I found little girls dressed as little boys and living like boys. And then I found, hormone replacement therapy and surgeries and all these things. I found this ideology that said that gender is something that you feel on the inside, and if you don't feel it, then you're something else. And so all of a sudden now, my kind of biggest fear that I don't fit in with girls, I'm not like a girl, was realized because I was given what looked like scientific evidence that said that actually, no, I was born wrong. There was something wrong, that I was supposed to be born a boy, and something messed up in my mother's womb. And therefore I'm now born in this female body that I don't belong in. I used to think it was kind of like an intersex disorder. I used to think, it was literally a biologically male brain in a biologically female body. If I did have a male brain in a female body, then God's designed me that way for a purpose. And I need to embrace the female body as much as I'm embracing the male brain. I said to myself, doing a really good job of embracing this male brain that I've got and living that out, but I'm not doing a very good job of embracing the female body that God's given me. I think that by being a female, I define femininity. Yeah. And so anything I do is by definition what a female does. And I have I suppose there's a power in that.
That is absolutely remarkable, you know, that you define femininity because you are a female and not the other way around. I think that's the key thing to pick up, if anything is. Yeah. So what about things like, you know, I suppose because that answers all the questions like, you know, born this way. Well, actually, you're born the way you are and you define femininity. And it doesn't define, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, and there's a power in it. It's empowering. I'm no longer just subject to the ebb and flow of society's definition. I am female by right of birth, by right of my biology, and I get to define what a female is by simply just being one.
Not enough attention and not enough time is taken for pastors to equip themselves with a biblical world and life view and with a cultural apologetic. So it's often not their fault. They're very often, you know, this just wasn't on the test. This trope that you've correctly pointed out there, that, well, you know, I just need to preach the gospel, is a reflection of the collapse of the biblical world and life view within the church. Pastors of previous generations recognized that part of the message of the gospel included human identity and sexuality, that marriage was a central part of the declaration of the gospel of the kingdom. Now, if you take away fatherhood and the idea of bride and bridegroom, what is the gospel? We've lost our sense of the gospel. So previous generations of Christians did not struggle with this. It only seems to be the contemporary church, contemporary Christians that struggle with the notion that marriage, the male and female bond of monogamous marriage, is a central aspect to the meaning and proclamation of the gospel of the kingdom. You don't have to be an expert in apologetics and culture. That's not required of every pastor, but we need to take the time to prepare ourselves with a biblical worldview. And as Charles Spurgeon often said, you know, I have a Bible in one hand and a newspaper in the other. I've got to be relating these two. I've got to be showing people how the Word of God relates itself to all of the issues that are going in our culture, because that is what our congregations are confronting week in and week out, Monday through Friday. They're in the workplace and with their neighbors and so on and so forth, and they are grappling with these issues. So we have to be able to help them to understand how the Word of God, how the claims of Christ and his lordship, for those of us who are Christians who are listening, applies to all these different areas of life. And I don't think we've given anywhere near sufficient attention to that. When battles in the culture are over pronouns, you can't leave that struggle to J.K. Rowling. You can't leave it to Sharon Davis. If we in any way adulterate the word, try and shave off the rough edges, try and hide it, try and cover it, are ashamed of it in some way or embarrassed about it, we will find that adulterating of the word will not commend itself to the conscience of people. You know, the bishops in the House of Lords failed monumentally on this with the redefinition of marriage. We continue to fail in publicly on this issue. And actually, people are crying out for some clarity. What can we do? Well, we have to recover our prophetic voice. That's one thing. So we have to be prepared to speak to the issue. You know, the church has become largely like an Arctic river today. It's frozen at the mouth, and we have to get unfrozen. You know, we have to speak, and we have to get serious again about discipline around infidelity and adultery and fornication in the life of the church. And, you know, it has been shown, studies have shown that, you know, if you want a lasting, stable, fulfilling in every way marriage, the latest stats and studies have shown marry a committed Christian man, ladies.